TopVelocity.net, 3x pitch BioMetrics here. Harrison got him at 75 miles an hour from camp. Check out some of the details here. We can see in his sequencing, we got some issues. We're going to look at that. Arm, hip, chest should be hip, chest, arm. And then the deceleration sequencing, hip, arm, chest should be hip, chest, arm. So sequencing is off. We have pelvis speeds, 682 degrees per second, kind of on the, it's 75 miles an hour, probably, obviously would match up on the low end for high velocity guys. Chest, 1,000, a little bit better. And then hip to shoulder separation, the spine load, 8 degrees. So definitely not a lot of hip to shoulder separation here. So we can see a lot of things need to improve. So let's walk through the delivery, and we'll pull up some graphs so we can see it more visually. So coming out of leg lift, loading straight down, getting into an ipsilateral trunk position. It's going to make it harder to, good trunk, closing the trunk off, but a little bit too ipsilateral is going to be hard to get out of that hip or drive through that hip. By leaning into a contralateral position, which is leaning back towards, for him, first base, that would give the hip more freedom to extend and rotate and open. So want to just carry the hips more forward and down at the same rate. You can see the lift leg too getting pretty far away from the body at that point, so it's closer to being put down, so giving less time for the back leg to drive, which you can see front foot landing, back leg is still trying to get extended and rotated. So that's probably why the hip to shoulder separation is going to be poor. So if we look hip line, shoulder line, we can see even though separation at this point, but when the hips start to rotate, it syncs up pretty quick. So if we look at this graph, we can see down here in the blue check, hip, chest, rotation delta. You can see initially it's pretty good, but as the hips open, I'm looking for when the hip opens, where am I at hip to shoulder separation, or how much separation do I have at that point, and only 8 degrees. So that's the problem, is the setup was good, but the back leg was unable to power the hips through rotation, so everything synced up and came around together. Okay, and then that's going to affect the sequencing. So we saw how the sequencing was off. It should have been hip, trunk, arm. So if we look here and we look at the red line, that's the hips. The blue green line is the trunk and glove side. And we can see those peaking first, and then the hips peaked. So that's where it was out of sequence. So basically the red should have started back here where the red was peaking. Then we saw the trunk and glove peaking. It's good that the trunk and glove are peaking together. If we see those pulling apart, then the glove side is pulling a lot of the energy, a lot of the trunk energy. We don't want to see that. We want to see the hips driving a lot of the energy. So what Harrison's doing is the hips and trunk are working together, but not a lot of pulling through the glove side, which is actually a positive. And then the arm path comes along. We also too don't see, as much as we don't see a good back leg drive, we see a lot of collapsing back leg. We don't see a lot of good front leg drive. So if we look at pitch release and we go to like chest position, we can see forward 46 degrees, which is not too bad. It's just how rotational it is. So it's at 35 contralateral. So it means that Harrison just started to pull off really hard and rotate off, so not a lot of energy was being driven towards the target. So 35 degrees is pretty excessive. We don't want to go past 25. It starts to not increase ball speed and puts a lot more stress on the arm. So, and also too, you can see the arm getting fully extended. That's harder on the elbow too. We don't want to go into full extension. So if the trunk was pushing more forward, the arm would stay in a little bit more flexion and then go into internal rotation. So it really goes back to the beginning. I like how the trunk was counter rotated, but it's too ipsilateral, so we need to get more contralateral. Then we need to open, or not let the lift leg get out so early. Focus on riding the hips better, getting the back leg to extend and drive into front foot strike. You can see not much of that is going on, just more collapsing. We need to get it, then that would help separation. And then hopefully that will carry the energy in the trunk better, and it won't have to keep spinning off at that point. So, and And then, just speeds and power wise, you get the hip speeds, trunk speeds up, get more power into the system, and then you start climbing up the levels of ball velocity, and you start to get where you want to be.